The bitter chill of a Missouri winter wrapped around Oakridge Correctional Facility like a shroud, its concrete walls standing stark against the slate-gray sky. Inside, within the prison chapel's muted glow, Sarah Mitchell's hands trembled as she placed a leather-bound Bible into her canvas tote bag. The 35-year-old chaplain's honey-brown eyes darted nervously toward the door, the same door through which Marcus Delaney would soon enter for their final counseling session. But before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Her heart hammered against her ribs, each beat a reminder of the irreversible choice she had made. By this time tomorrow, she would have betrayed everything she once stood for, her faith, her calling, her oath to the prison system. By this time tomorrow, she would be running for her life alongside a convicted murderer who had promised her love while concealing the darkness that still lurked within him. Sarah had no way of knowing that in less than 3 weeks, her body would be discovered among the frost-covered weeds behind an abandoned farmhouse in Harper County, bearing the same distinctive wounds that had become Marcus Delaney's chilling signature, a truth that would shock the nation and transform her from misguided accomplice to final victim in a killer's twisted game. The path that led Sarah Mitchell to that fateful moment in the chapel began 2 years earlier, when she first walked through the imposing gates of Oakridge Correctional Facility. Fresh from her divorce and still mourning her pastor father's unexpected death, Sarah had thrown herself into prison ministry, seeking purpose in the spiritual guidance of those society had cast aside. With her gentle smile and genuine compassion, she quickly earned the respect of both inmates and staff, a beacon of light in an otherwise bleak institution. Reverend Thomas Wilson, the senior chaplain who had taken Sarah under his wing, often remarked on her natural gift for the work. "You see the divine spark in everyone," he told her once, his weathered face crinkling with approval. "That's rare, especially in a place like this." Sarah had beamed at the praise, never suspecting that very quality would eventually lead to her downfall. She first encountered Marcus Delaney 6 months into her tenure at Oakridge. At 42, Delaney was serving consecutive life sentences for the murders of 3 women, former lovers who had attempted to leave him. Despite his heinous crimes, Marcus possessed a disarming charm and intelligence that had made him something of a prison celebrity. Tall and broad-shouldered, with penetrating blue eyes and salt and pepper hair, he carried himself with a confidence that seemed out of place in prison-issued clothing. Their initial meeting occurred during a group Bible study. While other inmates shuffled through pages with varying degrees of interest, Marcus recited passages from memory, his voice resonant with what appeared to be genuine conviction. After the session, he approached Sarah with questions about redemption that seemed to come from a place of authentic soul-searching. "Do you believe someone like me can truly be forgiven, Chaplain Mitchell?" he asked, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Not just by God, but by the world." The vulnerability in his question stirred something in Sarah, a compassionate instinct that would gradually transform into something far more dangerous. "I believe in the possibility of redemption for everyone," she had answered, unaware of how those words would echo in her mind in the months to come. Warden Richard Coleman had warned all staff about Delaney's manipulative tendencies during orientation. "Don't be fooled by the charming exterior," he'd cautioned, his stern face underscoring the gravity of his words. "Delaney doesn't just kill, he consumes. He's been known to form inappropriate attachments to female staff. We've had to transfer 2 nurses already." At the time, Sarah had nodded solemnly, certain that her professional boundaries and spiritual calling would protect her. She was there to save souls, not to be seduced by them. Her divorce had left her wary of romantic entanglements anyway, And the idea of being attracted to an inmate, much less a convicted murderer, seemed absurd. Yet as weeks turned into months, Sarah found herself looking forward to her sessions with Marcus more than any other part of her work. Their theological discussions evolved into philosophical debates, then into personal conversations that skirted the edges of propriety. Marcus shared stories of his troubled childhood, an abusive father, a mother who turned to substances to cope, his own desperate search for connection in a world that seemed determined to reject him. "Sometimes I think I was damned from the start," he confided during one of their private counseling sessions, a single tear tracking down his cheek. "But then you came along, Sarah. You showed me that maybe there's still hope, even for someone like me." It was the first time he had used her first name. Protocol dictated that she correct him immediately, re-establish the professional boundary. Instead, Sarah felt a flush of warmth spread through her chest. She told herself it was merely pride in her work, satisfaction at reaching a troubled soul. Deep down, she knew it was something else entirely. Victoria Ramirez, Oakridge's head of security, was the first to notice the shift in Sarah's behavior. Sharp-eyed and intuitive, Vicky had seen this pattern before in her 20 years on the job. The lingering glances, the slightly too long counseling sessions, the way Sarah's cheeks colored whenever Delaney's name was mentioned. "Mitchell," Vicky said one afternoon, cornering Sarah in the empty staff lounge, "we need to talk about your interactions with Delaney." Her tone was professional but tinged with genuine concern. Sarah's defensive response only confirmed Vicky's suspicions. "I'm just doing my job," she insisted, unable to meet the older woman's gaze. Inmate Delaney has made remarkable spiritual progress. I'm providing guidance, nothing more." Vicky's expression softened slightly. "Look, I've been here a long time. I've seen smart people, good people, get manipulated by inmates like him. If there's something going on, even just in your head, now's the time to ask for a reassignment. No shame in it. Happens more than you'd think." But Sarah couldn't bear the thought of not seeing Marcus again. She promised Vicky she would maintain strict boundaries, knowing even as the words left her mouth that it was too late. The line had already been crossed in her heart, if not in action. That night, alone in her modest Riverdale apartment, Sarah stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. What was happening to her? She barely recognized the woman looking back, a woman contemplating throwing away her career, her reputation, her very freedom for a man who had taken 3 lives. A man who might be manipulating her, just as he had manipulated others before. She called her sister Becky, seeking some anchor to reality without revealing the true nature of her crisis. "I just wanted to hear a familiar voice," she said, forcing lightness into her tone. "Tell me about the kids." As Becky chatted about her children's latest accomplishments, Sarah felt a pang of longing for the normal life she'd once envisioned for herself. A husband, children, Sunday dinners with extended family. The life that had slipped through her fingers when her ex-husband decided he no longer wanted children or the constraints of marriage. "You sound off," Becky said suddenly. "Is everything okay with work? That prison isn't getting to you, is it?" Sarah assured her sister all was well, but after hanging up, she sank to the floor, overwhelmed by the weight of her secret. She reached for her Bible, seeking guidance in its familiar passages, but the words blurred before her eyes. Instead, she found herself remembering Marcus's hands, how they moved expressively when he spoke of redemption, how they might feel against her skin. She knew then that she was lost. The shift from inappropriate attachment to active conspiracy occurred, gradually then all at once. It began with small violations, sharing personal details about her life, allowing their hands to touch during Bible exchanges, staying alone with Marcus in the chapel beyond scheduled hours. Each transgression made the next one easier, eroding her professional ethics bit by bit. When Marcus first suggested escape, Sarah had recoiled in horror. They were in the chapel storage room, supposedly taking inventory of donated materials. He had drawn closer than regulations permitted, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw in a forbidden caress. "We could be together, Sarah," he whispered, his breath warm against her ear. "Really together. Not like this. Not with walls and guards, and rules keeping us apart." "That's impossible," she had responded, though her heart raced at the thought. "You're serving multiple life sentences. There's no future for us outside these walls." Marcus's smile held a confidence that should have alarmed her. "Nothing's impossible with the right help. I've been a model prisoner for years. I work in the laundry, the kitchen. I know this place's rhythms, its weaknesses. All I need is someone on the outside to coordinate, someone they trust." Sarah had pulled away then, shaking her head. "I can't. What you're suggesting? It's not just against my job. It's against the law. It's against everything I believe in." "Is it?" Marcus challenged softly. "You believe in redemption, in second chances. You believe God brings people together for a reason. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Maybe this is my redemption story, Sarah. Maybe you're the angel sent to deliver me." Those words haunted Sarah for weeks afterward. She tried to distance herself, even requested different shifts, but found herself drawn back to Marcus like a moth to flame. Each time she resolved to end whatever this was between them, he would say something that resonated with her deepest insecurities and desires, as if he could read her soul. "You're not like other people, Sarah," he told her during one session. "You see the world differently, feel things more deeply. That's why you understand me when no one else does. That's why we found each other in this unlikely place." By the time Sarah realized she was being manipulated, she was already too compromised to extricate herself. The emotional affair had progressed to physical contact, forbidden embraces and kisses, stolen in blind spots of the prison's surveillance system. She had smuggled in a cell phone, allowing them to communicate during off hours. Each step deeper into the conspiracy was rationalized, each risk justified by the intensity of feelings she was certain were love. Marcus's escape plan was surprisingly simple in its conception, though complex in execution. It required insider knowledge of guard, rotations, security protocols, and the physical layout of Oakridge, all information Sarah had access to. It required tools and clothing hidden in strategic locations, vehicles positioned for quick getaways, and money for the initial days on the run. Most crucially, it required someone above suspicion who could create a diversion at precisely the right moment. Sarah spent weeks gathering what they needed, withdrawing her modest savings, purchasing burner phones, and scouting locations where they could hide while authorities conducted their initial search. She rented a storage unit under a false name, filling it with supplies they would need. Each action further solidified her commitment, making it increasingly impossible to turn back. The night before the planned escape, Sarah visited her sister. One last time, she sat at Becky's kitchen table, watching her niece and nephew play in the backyard, knowing she might never see them again. The weight of her imminent betrayal pressed on her chest, making it difficult to breathe. "Are you sure you're okay?" Becky asked, setting a cup of tea before her. "You've seemed, I don't know, distracted lately. Distant." Sarah forced a smile. "Just tired. The prison's been short-staffed, and I've been picking up extra sessions." "Well, you need to take care of yourself," Becky said, squeezing her shoulder affectionately. "Dad always said you had the biggest heart of any of us. Sometimes I worry. You give too much to those inmates and don't leave enough for yourself." The mention of their father sent a wave of shame through Sarah. What would he think of her now? The daughter who had followed in his footsteps, dedicating her life to ministry, now planning to throw it all away for a convicted killer. The thought nearly broke her resolve. "Becky," she said suddenly, "do you believe people can change, really change, fundamentally?" Her sister considered the question. "I think people can grow, learn, improve, but completely change who they are at their core?" She shook her head. "That's much rarer. Why do you ask?" Sarah shrugged, avoiding her sister's perceptive gaze. "Just something I've been discussing with one of my groups. The possibility of redemption." That night, as Sarah packed the final items she would take with her, identification documents, cash, a few cherished photographs, her phone rang. Reverend Wilson's name flashed on the screen. Her hand hovered over the device, guilt making her hesitate. The old chaplain had been like a second father to her, especially after her own father's passing. His disappointment would be unbearable. She let the call go to voicemail, but played the message immediately. "Sarah, it's Thomas," the familiar voice spoke, concern evident in his tone. "I need to speak with you before tomorrow's shift. Something's come to my attention regarding inmate Delaney's former relationships with staff members at his previous facility. It's troubling. Please call me back as soon as you can, no matter the hour." Sarah's hand trembled as she deleted the message. She couldn't risk having her resolve weakened, not when they were so close. Whatever Reverend Wilson had discovered, it couldn't change what she felt, what she knew in her heart. Marcus loved her. He had changed. Their love was different. In the early hours of the morning, Sarah knelt beside her bed and prayed one last time, tears streaming down her face. She asked for forgiveness for what she was about to do, begged for a sign if she was making a terrible mistake. The silence that greeted her seemed answer enough. As dawn broke over Millfield, Sarah Mitchell drove to Oakridge Correctional Facility for what would be her final day as a prison chaplain. Her badge gleamed in the early morning light as she passed through security, nodding to colleagues who had no idea of the betrayal about to unfold. The weight of the sedative in her purse, intended for the guard who would be stationed outside the chapel during their counseling session, seemed to burn through the fabric. The plan was in motion. By nightfall, if all went as intended, she and Marcus would be 50 miles away, hidden in the cabin near Lake Evergreen, beginning their new life together. Sarah tried to focus on that future, pushing away the doubts that threatened to overwhelm her. She didn't see Victoria Ramirez watching her from the security office, eyes narrowed in suspicion. She didn't know that Reverend Wilson had already shared his concerns with Warden Coleman. She didn't realize that her every move that day would be scrutinized, her interactions with Marcus observed through newly activated surveillance cameras in the chapel's blind spots. As Sarah walked down the long corridor toward the chapel where Marcus would soon meet her, her steps faltered. A memory surfaced. Marcus describing one of his victims, the way he spoke of her defiance with a strange gleam in his eye. At the time, Sarah had attributed it to remorse. Now, in the cold light of her impending crime, she wondered if it had been something else entirely. The moment passed, and Sarah pushed open the chapel door, stepping into the hushed space that had once represented her calling, but now served as the launching point for her downfall. Outside, the Missouri winter tightened its grip on Oakridge Correctional Facility, indifferent to the human drama unfolding within its walls. Sarah Mitchell arranged her Bible and notes on the small table, awaiting Marcus Delaney's arrival. She had no way of knowing that in 3 short weeks, the search for the escaped convict and his accomplice would end in her death. That the man she believed loved her would reveal his true nature once she had served her purpose. That despite all warnings, despite all evidence, she had fallen prey to the same deadly charm that had claimed 3 lives before hers. The clock on the chapel wall ticked steadily forward, In just a few hours, everything would change. Sarah took a deep breath and prepared to forfeit her soul for a killer's empty promises. The chapel door opened with a soft creak as Marcus Delaney entered, escorted by Officer Jenkins. Sarah's pulse quickened at the sight of him. Even in prison denim, Marcus carried himself with an innate confidence that set him apart from other inmates. His eyes found hers immediately, a silent communication passing between them that made her palms sweat. 45 minutes, Chaplain Mitchell, Jenkins said, checking his watch. I'll be right outside. Sarah nodded, avoiding the young guard's eyes. The sedative in her pocket seemed to pulse with accusation. Thank you, officer. We'll be reviewing scripture passages for the upcoming sermon. As the door closed behind Jenkins, Marcus's demeanor shifted subtly. The humble spiritual seeker vanished, replaced by a man with sharp, calculating eyes. He moved toward her with purpose, keeping his voice low. Is everything ready? He asked without preamble. Sarah nodded, suddenly finding it difficult to speak. The reality of what they were about to do crashed over her like a cold wave. The maintenance door alarm has been disabled. The guard rotation changes at 3:15, giving us an 8-minute window. There's a service corridor that leads... Marcus cut her off with a raised hand. I memorized the route. The clothes and backpack. Hidden in the storage closet, behind the hymnal boxes. The car is parked where we discussed. Keys under the front wheel well. Marcus smiled, then his entire face transforming. He reached for her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. You've done beautifully, Sarah. By tonight, we'll be starting our new life. Just imagine, no more walls, no more hiding. Just you and me. The tenderness in his voice melted away her reservations. This was why she was risking everything, for moments like this, for the future they would build together. Sarah allowed herself to lean into his touch, into the fantasy that had consumed her thoughts for months. There's just one thing left, she whispered, reaching into her pocket. The sedative came in liquid form, tasteless when mixed with coffee. Sarah had filched it from her neighbor's medicine cabinet. The elderly woman had been prescribed sleep aids after her husband's death. The dose wasn't enough to harm Jenkins, just enough to ensure he'd be sluggish, slow to respond when they made their move. Sarah's hand trembled as she prepared the officer's coffee, stirring in the clear liquid. The act crossed a line she had never imagined herself capable of crossing. This wasn't just breaking rules anymore. This was drugging an innocent person, a colleague who had always been kind to her. Having second thoughts? Marcus asked, observing her hesitation. His tone was light, but something in his eyes hardened. Sarah shook her head. No, it's really happening, that's all. Cold feet are natural, Marcus said, his voice softening again. He moved behind her, hands resting on her shoulders. But think about tomorrow, Sarah. Think about waking up together, watching the sunrise over the lake. No more sneaking moments in storage rooms. No more pretending. The image was intoxicating. Sarah drew strength from it as she stepped toward the door, coffee cup in hand. Officer Jenkins, I made you some coffee. Thought you might need it during the shift change. Everything after that seemed to unfold in surreal slow motion. Jenkins accepting the coffee with a grateful smile, the gradual drooping of his eyelids as the sedative took effect. Marcus changing quickly into civilian clothes, jeans, flannel, shirt, work boots, looking startlingly normal, like any man you might pass on the street. The heart-stopping moment when they slipped past Jenkins's slumped form and into the service corridor. Sarah's security badge granting them access to restricted areas. Alarms began blaring just as they reached the maintenance exit. Someone had discovered Jenkins or noticed the surveillance blind spot in the chapel. Sarah's heart hammered so violently she thought it might burst from her chest. Run, Marcus commanded, grabbing her hand. They sprinted across the staff parking lot, ducking between vehicles. Sarah could hear shouting behind them, the heavy footfalls of security personnel in pursuit. The chain-link fence loomed ahead, the final barrier between them and freedom. Marcus scaled it first, his athletic build making it look effortless. He reached back for Sarah, hauling her up and over with surprising strength. Her pants tore on the metal, a sharp pain lancing through her leg as she tumbled to the ground. On the other side, the car, she gasped, pointing toward the visitor lot where she'd left her sister's borrowed Honda. They reached it just as the first guards emerged through the gate. Marcus dove into the driver's seat while Sarah fumbled. With the keys, her fingers numb with adrenaline, the engine roared to life, tires squealing as they tore out of the parking lot and onto the main road. In the rearview mirror, Sarah caught a glimpse of Victoria Ramirez's face, watching them flee. The expression of disappointment and betrayal would haunt her for days to come. "We did it," Marcus laughed, a wild, exhilarated sound as they sped toward the highway. "You beautiful, brilliant woman, we actually did it." His joy was infectious. Despite the terror, despite the knowledge that her life as she knew it was over, Sarah felt a surge of elation. They'd beaten the odds. They were together, really together, for the first time. As they crossed the county line, Marcus reached for her hand, bringing it to his lips in a gesture that sent warmth flooding through her. "I love you," he said, eyes on the road ahead. "Never doubt that." In that moment, Sarah believed him with her whole heart. Their first stop was the Lake Evergreen cabin, a remote hunting property Sarah had rented under a false name 2 weeks earlier. Nestled among dense pine forest, it offered perfect seclusion for the initial days of their escape. They arrived just as dusk was settling, the sky painted in dramatic strokes of orange and purple. Inside, the cabin was spare but sufficient. A wood stove, a kitchenette, a lumpy double bed in the single bedroom. Sarah had stocked it with groceries, first aid supplies, and changes of clothes for them both. After the frantic intensity of their escape, the quiet felt almost oppressive. Reality began to seep in as Sarah watched the evening news, her face staring back at her alongside Marcus's mugshot. "Manhunt underway for escape killer and prison chaplain accomplice," the headline proclaimed. Her sister Becky appeared briefly on screen, tearfully pleading for Sarah to turn herself in. "They don't understand," Marcus said, flicking off the television and pulling Sarah into his arms. "They can't comprehend what we have, but they'll forget, eventually. We'll make new identities, start fresh somewhere far from here." That night, as they lay together in the cabin's small bed, Sarah experienced a strange duality. Absolute terror, intermingled with the most profound happiness she'd ever known. Marcus's touch, his whispered promises in the darkness, seemed to validate every choice she'd made. They remained at the cabin for 3 days, longer than planned. Marcus grew increasingly restless, pacing the small space like a caged animal. He began watching the road obsessively, jumping at every distant sound. "We need to move," he announced on the 3rd morning, stuffing their few possessions into backpacks. "They're getting too close." Sarah wasn't sure how he knew this. There had been no signs of police activity nearby, no helicopters overhead, but the urgency in his voice brooked no argument. They abandoned the Honda at a shopping mall 2 towns over, stealing license plates from another vehicle to disguise the sedan they purchased with cash from a classified ad. This hadn't been part of the original plan, and the ease with which Marcus committed the theft disturbed Sarah. "It's survival," he explained, noticing her discomfort. "The rules are different now." They zigzagged across rural Missouri, staying at anonymous roadside motels under false names. Each day brought new revelations about Marcus, some thrilling, others unsettling. He knew how to create false identification, how to move without leaving digital footprints, how to scan a crowd for undercover officers. Skills that spoke of meticulous planning beyond what he'd shared with Sarah. At a motel outside Jefferson City, Sarah first witnessed Marcus's temper. The room's television malfunctioned, and his reaction was volcanic, a flash of rage so intense it transformed his face into something unrecognizable. He apologized immediately, blaming the stress of their situation, but the moment lingered. In Sarah's mind, on their 6th day as fugitives, they saw Reverend Wilson on television addressing reporters outside Oakridge Correctional. "Sarah, if you're watching this, it's not too late," the elderly chaplain pleaded, his face etched with concern. "Whatever hold Delaney has on you, whatever promises he's made, please remember who you are. Remember what you stand for. You can still come home." Marcus switched off the TV with a derisive snort. "Sanctimonious old fool, he never understood you like I do." But the Reverend's words had touched something in Sarah, a doubt that had been growing silently beneath the surface of her conviction. She remembered the voicemail Wilson had left her the night before the escape, the one she'd deleted without returning his call. What had he discovered about Marcus's past relationships? They were approaching their 2nd week on the run when Marcus announced they needed to separate temporarily. "The heat's still too intense," he explained, poring over a map spread across their latest motel bed. "They're expecting us to stay together. If we split up, move independently for a few days, we can throw them off the trail." Alarm bells rang in Sarah's mind. "That wasn't our plan." "Plans change," Marcus replied, not looking up. "I'll head west, draw their attention. You go north, toward this spot." He circled a location in Harper County. "There's an abandoned farmhouse there. I researched it before. Remote, off the main roads, perfect place to lie low." "How do you know about that place?" Sarah asked, the question slipping out before she could stop herself. Marcus's eyes flicked up, something cold and assessing in them that sent a chill down her spine. But then he smiled, the expression warming his features. "One of the other inmates mentioned it, a place his cousin used to use for cooking meth. Said it was so hidden, police never found it even when they were actively looking." He took her hand, squeezing gently. "Trust me, Sarah. Have I led you wrong yet?" That night, as Marcus slept beside her, Sarah carefully extracted her burner, phoned from her bag, and did something she'd been avoiding for days. She searched for information about his previous victims. The crime scene photos made her physically ill. Each woman had been found with identical wounds, precise, almost surgical cuts across the throat, and a distinctive pattern carved into their chest. The articles described Marcus as methodical and ritualistic in his killings. One psychiatrist interviewed called him a predator who derives satisfaction from complete control over his victims. Most disturbing were the details about his relationships with these women. Each had been described by friends and family as completely devoted to Marcus, convinced he was misunderstood, certain of his love for them. Each had isolated themselves from loved ones in the months leading up to their deaths. Sarah set the phone down with trembling hands, her mind racing. This couldn't be the same man who held her so tenderly, who spoke of redemption with tears in his eyes. The Marcus she knew was changed, reformed through faith and love. Wasn't he? The next morning, Marcus left for his westward diversion, promising to meet her at the farmhouse in 3 days. The separation brought both relief and anxiety for Sarah. She found herself constantly checking over her shoulder as she made her way north, convinced she was being followed, though whether by police or by Marcus himself she couldn't have said. The farmhouse was exactly as Marcus had described, isolated, dilapidated, practically invisible from the main road. Sarah arrived as dusk was falling, the lengthening shadows making the abandoned structure look particularly ominous. Inside, a thick layer of dust covered every surface, the air stale and oppressive. Sarah spent the first night alone in the dark, jumping at every creak and groan of the ancient structure. Her mind kept returning to those crime scene photos, to the pattern of cuts that had marked each of Marcus's victims. In the morning light, her fears seemed overblown. The stress was getting to her, she decided, making her paranoid. She busied herself cleaning one room to make it habitable, trying not to think about the fact that she was now entirely dependent on Marcus. Her money was nearly gone. Her identity was compromised. She had no one else to turn to, nowhere else to go. On the third day, Sarah heard a vehicle approaching. Peering through dusty windows, she recognized the battered pickup truck Marcus had described. Relief flooded through her as she ran to the door. But something made her pause before opening it. A memory surfaced. Marcus describing the moment. One of his victims realized she was going to die, the beautiful transformation of fear in her eyes. Sarah stepped back from the door, hands shaking. For the first time, she saw her situation with absolute clarity. The careful grooming, the isolation from those who cared about her, the escalating commitments that bound her to him, the secrets shared that made her complicit. It was all part of a pattern she had studied in her criminology courses, but had been too blinded by emotion to recognize when it enveloped her. Marcus hadn't escaped prison to start a new life with her. She was just another victim, another woman to control, to terrify, to destroy, when he tired of the game. How many others had there been beyond the 3 he'd been convicted for? How many had trusted him, loved him, only to face that beautiful transformation in their final moments? As Marcus's footsteps approached the porch, Sarah made her decision. She would not become another name on his list, another crime scene, a photo for some future chaplain to discover in horror. She grabbed the hunting knife she'd found in the kitchen drawer, positioning herself behind the door. The handle turned. The door swung open. Marcus stepped inside, his familiar cologne filling the stale air. "Sarah," he called, voice echoing in the empty house. "I'm home." The word sent a chill through her. Home. As if this decaying farmhouse were the beginning of their life together, rather than potentially the end of hers. Sarah stepped from behind the door, knife clutched behind her back. "Here," she answered, her voice steadier than she expected. Marcus turned, his face lighting up at the sight of her. He looked the same as ever. Handsome, charismatic, the man she had sacrificed everything for. But now she saw beyond the mask to the emptiness underneath. "I missed you," he said, opening his arms for an embrace. Sarah stepped back. "I know what you are." The change was instantaneous. Marcus's warm expression froze, then shifted into something calculating and cold. All pretense of love vanished from his eyes, replaced by a predatory assessment that made Sarah's skin crawl. "What took you so long?" he asked quietly. The others figured it out much earlier. His casual confirmation of her worst fears stole Sarah's breath. The knife trembled in her grip behind her back as Marcus took a step toward her, then another. "Did you really think I loved you, Sarah? That I found God in that chapel?" He laughed, the sound entirely devoid of warmth. "You people are all the same, so desperate to believe in redemption, in change, so easy to manipulate." With each word, Sarah felt her former life slipping further away. The respected chaplain, the woman of faith, the daughter who had made her father proud. That person seemed to belong to another lifetime now. "You don't have to do this," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Marcus tilted his head, studying her with detached curiosity. "But I want to. That's what none of you ever understand." He reached into his jacket pocket, extracting a small, glinting object. "I've been dreaming about this moment since I first saw you walk into the chapel, so righteous, so certain of your purpose." Sarah raised the knife as he moved toward her, but her hand was shaking too badly to pose any real threat. Marcus looked almost disappointed at her feeble defense. "Really, Sarah? After everything, this is all you have for me?" "What happened?" Next occurred in a blur of motion and sound. As Marcus lunged forward, the farmhouse door burst open behind him. Victoria Ramirez led the charge, weapon drawn, followed by Detective Gabriel Morales and a tactical team in full gear. "Police, drop your weapon, Delaney!" The distraction gave Sarah her moment. With strength born of desperation, she drove the knife forward just as Marcus turned toward the intrusion. His eyes widened in shock, not at the police presence, but at her betrayal. Then fury replaced the shock as he fell backward, blood blooming across his shirt. The aftermath passed in fragmented impressions for Sarah, being led from the farmhouse in handcuffs, the ambulance taking Marcus away, his condition uncertain. Victoria Ramirez explaining how they'd tracked them through Sarah's sister's car, the one piece of the plan Sarah hadn't thoroughly covered. Reverend Wilson found records from Delaney's previous prison, Vicky told her during the long drive back to Millfield. He had a pattern, forming relationships with female staff, manipulating them into helping him. None of them survived more than 3 weeks after the escape. The words confirmed what Sarah already knew. She had been marked for death from the beginning. Marcus had never intended for their new life to last. In the holding cell that night, awaiting her arraignment, Sarah received an unexpected visitor. Olivia Bennett, sister of Marcus's last victim, stood on the other side of the bars, studying Sarah with an expression caught between anger and pity. "I needed to see you," Olivia said finally, "to understand how it happens, how someone like you, educated, respected, falls for someone like him." Sarah looked up, meeting the other woman's gaze. "One step at a time," she answered quietly. "One compromise after another until you can't find your way back." Olivia nodded, as if this confirmed something she'd long suspected. Diana was the same way, so certain she could save him, so convinced he'd changed. She paused, then added, "The doctors say he'll survive. He'll stand trial for the escape, for the assault on the guard. And I'll stand trial alongside him," Sarah acknowledged, the full weight of her actions settling over her. "Yes," Olivia agreed without judgment, "but you'll also be alive to face those consequences. The others weren't so fortunate." As Olivia turned to leave, Sarah called after her. "How do you move forward after something like this?" The woman paused, considering. "One step at a time," she echoed Sarah's words back to her. "One day at a time." Alone in her cell, Sarah Mitchell closed her eyes, the faces of those she'd betrayed parading through her mind. Her sister, Reverend Wilson, the innocent guard. She'd drugged, the institution she'd sworn to serve. The path to redemption, if it existed at all, would be long and painful, but she was alive to walk it. And in that cold, stark clarity of her final realization, Sarah understood that surviving Marcus Delaney, both his manipulation and his murderous intent, might be the first step toward finding her way back. Up next, you've got 2 more. Standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.